It's UofL Today on 93.9 The Ville. Here's your host, Mark Hebert.
And welcome to UofL Today with Mark Hebert. This is the show about all things UofL, all the good things going on at UofL that you may not know about. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff, a lot of great research, great students, great faculty members like the one sitting in front of me. We're going to talk to here in just a second. So we're here to tell you about it. If you haven't heard all the great stuff going on at UofL, you can hear it on this show. Tell your friends, and you can brag a little bit about what's going on at the University of Louisville. So let's get right to it. On the show today, we're going to be talking about jobs in the state of Louisville's economy and what's coming up in 2016 as far as the economy is concerned. We'll also be talking to the director of Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies at UofL. She'll be talking about the instability in the Middle East, the refugee crisis, and Islamic extremism growing from the collapse of Syria. And the director of the McConnell Center will be here to promote a series of lectures this spring called Citizens and Statesmen. So we'll be talking about that in a few minutes. But up first, sitting in front of me, Jose Fernandez is a professor of economics at the University of Louisville College of Business. And that's what he's going to talk about today, economics and the economy of Louisville. So welcome, Jose. Glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
All right. Well, let's get right to it. What is Louisville's economy looking like right now? Is it good, bad, or indifferent?
It's actually pretty good. I mean, considering relative to the 2009 crisis, we've actually tacked on more jobs. We're back to where we were back from 2009. We've actually seen an increase in things like education and in health. We're about 20,000 jobs up from there. Although we still have not that high of a wage rate. So our median wage rates are around $16.25, which brings in the question about increasing the minimum wage and what that could potentially do to our economy.
Well, I want to talk to you about that in a minute. But the $16, you said that's the median.
That's the median.
So what's the average hourly wage of a Louisville worker?
The average is about $20.
$20 an hour.
About $20 an hour. But that includes your CEOs down to your folks at Flip Your Burgers, everyone in between. So $20, that's a very good average, particularly for a city of our size and our type of economy.
Okay, and you also said that there were 20,000 more jobs since when in the Louisville market? What year are you talking about
So
here?
Since 2008, so right before the crisis, right where everyone was really happy and housing prices were going up and looked like there was prosperous times going into the future, we're about 20,000 jobs above that amount. So we've recovered and tacked on extra 20,000 jobs. And if you think about that relative statewide, we were only about 25,000 jobs more. So the bulk of the increase in the state has occurred right here in this county.
So the bulk of the new jobs came from Jefferson County is the bottom line.
Yes, mainly. It's an old story.
I was going to say, Isn't this the old story that Louisville sends a lot of tax dollars to Frankfurt and never gets it back, and that we're the economic engine of Kentucky?
That's true. Us and the rest of the Golden Triangle. So the Louisville, Lafayette. Louisville, Lexington, and Northern Kentucky. We produce about 2/3 of the tax revenue for the state.
Wow.
And we have less than 50% of the population of the state. And so wherever those three counties go, that's where the rest of the state goes.
Do you think most people know that most people out in the rural areas of Kentucky understand that, those three big counties in Northern Kentucky, Lexington and Louisville, make up 2/3 of the jobs in this state and the tax base in this state?
I think they do know that, and I think they take full advantage of it. I mean, we are a state of 120 counties, where only about 3 of them are really in control of the tax revenue, but the rest are in control of state policy. So we see a lot of movement of tax revenue out toward the outerlying areas, with the exception of education. So Jefferson County does receive a lot more funds coming from the Fed and from the state when it comes to education, but when it comes to things for city projects, we don't see so much of the buck being passed over.
Right. So the good news on the economy is that we've recovered since the Great Recession of a couple of years ago. What's the bad news?
Well, the bad news is that we're still one of the highest tax burden cities in the entire United States. We routinely rank in the top 10, right? This year we're at 8 out of all cities in the United States.
And that's from who?
Who
says that?
This is from the U.S. government themselves. So this is not just some third party telling you that you are
so this
highly
is not some
tax burdened.
No, think tank that.
No. This is from the Office of Tax Analysis. So they rank us as third, and this is both at the low end of the income distribution. So when you look at folks making about $25,000 a year or less, we sit, I think, there right around 8th. in the country. When you look at folks making over 125,000, we're about fourth worst in the United States. So we have a heavy tax burden, and a lot of that has to deal with the occupation tax we have, along with state income taxes. So, for example, if you're a resident of the city of Louisville, well, you're going to pay a 3% occupation tax just for the pleasure of working in the city of Louisville. Meanwhile, if you live just outside of the city of Louisville, you get half of that, 1.5%. So it actually saves you a little tax dollars to move out to Oldham County or across the river over to Indiana than it is to sit in Louisville proper.
Well, so then how do you explain then the job growth in the city of Louisville if, as you say, the tax burden is so onerous? Well, that's my word. I put words in your mouth. Is it onerous? Is that a fair thing to say in an economist's mind?
Well, it is onerous if you want to grow jobs. But when you look at where the job centers are in the state of Kentucky, the first place is here. And so if there was going to be a recovery, it was going to be here first. We still have a great deal of low-wage income, and low-wage income helps to actually spur more and more business. I mean, that's a lot of what the right-to-work argument is about right now. The right-to-work argument, it just basically tells us that if something's cheap, we want to buy more of it. If something's more expensive, we want to buy less of it. And you can see the arguments on both sides. When you're not a right-to-work state, your unions have a lot of power. That's great for people who are participating in the union and actually have a union job. They get better benefits and everything else, but it closes out jobs for other people. So for other individuals to actually get employment, it's going to keep them unemployed. And we see that, right? So in the surrounding states, yes, they have lower average incomes, but they also have more jobs than we do. So all it's telling us is, well, which one do you want? Do you want more people to be employed, or do you want the people who are employed to get paid more?
So it's a mixed bag.
Right.
It's a mixed bag. I recently saw something, I believe it was in a magazine, it might have been in Forbes or someplace, that the jobs for college graduates are coming back. There's a rebound in jobs for college grads. Everyone was talking about, there was a lot of talk about college grads getting out of college and having degrees and not being able to find a job in their field of study. Is that true in Louisville as well? Is the job market opening up for college grads?
So this is going to be more anecdotal.
Okay.
I can tell you that when I hear from employers, they say that our students are very well trained technically. What they want to see more of is actually their soft skills. They're not seeing better soft skills in terms of the one-to-one, the ability to sit down here and communicate with one another. That's something that they want to see an improvement on, and that has been coming around. So we have been seeing better students who are able to sit down, give you that firm handshake, and be able to speak with their customers and their clients face-to-face. So we are seeing that improvement. There are more jobs out there. They're just having trouble filling them with qualified individuals. And the fact that qualified part was hard to understand before, because we're saying, well, wait a minute, we have all these people with college degrees. Where are they? It's that soft skills component.
What are the sectors of job growth? What are is it healthcare? Is it business? Is it computers? Where are jobs growing in the city of Louisville?
So this is also a mixed bag in the sense that there are areas where wage growth is really high, but the employment is not as high. So, for example, the information sector was the very hardest sector hit here in the city. We're still nowhere near the pre-crisis levels in terms of number of jobs, but they also have the highest wages, or at least relatively speaking. They've seen the highest wage growth. I think their wage growth is somewhere around 12% right now since the 2009 crisis. So they have this really high level that's going on. The big area, though, for us, and it's always been for us, is really the healthcare industry. If you're a physician, if you're a tech, that's a big growth area. The other growth area you may not hear about so much is the trades area. So if you're a plumber, a machinist, a carpenter, those folks are really coming back. Some of that could be the fact that there's more disposable income coming from the high-income groups, and they want to get their house fixed, or they need some projects done. But they are coming back, and they weren't there before.
We're talking with Jose Fernandez, who's a professor in the College of Business. He's an economics professor. We're talking to him about the Louisville area economy. What do you see in 2016? What's your prediction for 2016 for the Louisville economy? Will it continue to grow? Will it retract a little bit? What do you think?
I think it's going to continue to grow. I'm still a little worried about the GE sales, in the sense that whether or not they're finally going to find a buyer. I don't think that's going to be a big shot to the arm, because currently they turned down the offer that was presented to them, which means that they actually value this wing of their company a whole lot.
But aren't they saying that one of the corporate CEOs or somebody, the CFO of the company, saying that they were still looking for another buyer?
They are
looking
still
for somebody to look for a buyer, and that's what you're worried about, I guess, for Appliance Park.
Yes, I'm worried about how the new buyer is going to react to it. Now, I think the new buyer is going to look at them as more of a capital improvement more than anything else, that they're actually buying not just the product line, but the actual physical capital of making these products. So it's more on the how will those contracts be renegotiated with the workers when a new buyer comes through. I don't think it's going to be a very bad outcome where we're going to see closed down factories or anything like that. Otherwise, why would GE continue to pump more dollars into capital improvements into the appliance park as it is? I also think that housing sales may slow down a little bit now the interest rates are starting to kick up. UPS may be hurt a little bit by that as businesses will start to invest a little less and they won't be using as much of their logistic abilities that are coming out of Louisville, but not to a huge degree. I mean, those increases in interest rates are being faced not just by Louisville, but also by the surrounding area.
I remember Paul Coombs, who used to be a professor at the College of Business, used to say that it seemed like Louisville was insulated in some ways from both recession and from when the economy was going great guns. It didn't get as bad as the rest of the country did, but it didn't get as good as the rest of the country did. Is that still the case where Louisville is a little bit an anomaly?
It is still the case. It is still the case mainly because of our health sector. Our health, if you look at our maps for the health sector, both in jobs and in income, it doesn't look like 2009 even existed. You can look at those. Every other industry, you see this huge dip at 2009. Jobs seem to disappear. For health, they just kept on trucking through. Like nothing happened. If anything, they've experienced very steady growth throughout, and I continue to see that happening. The top wage earners since 2009 have all been different classifications of physicians and different classifications of nurses. So I don't see that changing, really, even with the Humana merger. I mean, if anything, Humana's going to become even more specialized in what they do.
You brought up a political debate that I'm not sure I want to get into, but I'm going to bring it up anyways. A couple things that Republicans are really pushing for in Frankfurt, prevailing wage legislation, and also minimum wage, and let's see, what else was there? Is there something else that I'm missing out there?
Oh, the Medicaid expansion.
Yeah, all those things. Do any of those things really could have a legitimate impact on the economy that either side says they will, either poorly or in a good way?
So increases in the minimum wage will hurt attracting new companies to the area, and that's just a fact. When you go to the grocery store, you look at the prices of the food items you're about to buy. If those prices go up, you buy less of them. Same thing's going to be true for workers. If the price of workers are going to go up, you may not decide to locate in those areas. And so the minimum wage is going to have an impact, and particularly, like I said before, where our median wage rate is, if we really do get to this mythical $15 an hour that we hear coming out of New York and Seattle and everywhere else, that's about half of all Louisvillians who are going to be affected by this wage rate. And that could mean a lot of people losing their jobs because companies are going to start wondering, well, is it better to put a computer in your place instead? Is it better to use a special ATM kiosk to replace the human aspect of it? And in some cases, it is.
But the reality is that's not going to happen. Politically, that is never going to, it's not going to happen in the next 5 years at least in Louisville or in Kentucky. They're talking about $10 an hour getting to that. And I think that's what the mayor ultimately approved in the city council. So with $10 an hour, is that going to have any impact on Louisville's economy when we get there?
No, it will.
You really do think that?
I really do think so.
You got a lot of folks that say the opposite, that it may actually help.
Let's put it this way. The same studies that the folks who are proponents for the minimum wage, right? The authors of those studies say that these increases are way beyond the statistical power of our studies.
Okay.
So no one who at least has done this work would be willing to bet a year's salary that things are not going to go one way or the other. It's still very murky waters. I do think there's going to be a reduction of employment. It's not going to be in the way of people getting fired, but it's going to be in the way of decreased job growth. Because, at the end of the day, I think we're still pretty humans at this and not computers at this. You don't want to go off and take someone's job away. You don't want to go away and fire someone over the holidays. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to close down that job opening that you have. you're not going to expand when you previously would. And that's where we're going to see the slowdown in growth.
Okay, we need to wrap this up. Give me either an optimistic or a pessimistic tone for 2016 on the Louisville economy.
I see still a very optimistic tone for the Louisville economy. We've experienced very steady growth, so it hasn't been this big explosion, which seems to say that things are moving in a more certain way forward. I think that job growth is going to continue. I hope to see more professional jobs start to come back so we can see those average wages increase. But at the very least, there'll be more employment overall. The labor force is increased, which is also a good sign, since one of the big arguments about unemployment is that, it's just people leaving the labor force and that's what's causing unemployment to fall. No, labor force has increased, so we are employing more individuals. So I do see positive things ahead for the city of Louisville.
Let's end on that note. Positivity. All right, very good. Jose Fernandez from the College of Business at the University of Louisville. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, when we come back, conflict, chaos, and religion in the Middle East. What does it mean for the United States? You're listening to UofL Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville.
This is our time to soar. We are an unstoppable force of innovation and academic excellence, solving the world's mysteries through research, stimulating growth in our community and beyond, and inspiring the next generation of leaders to build a better future for all of us. We are the University of Louisville. Watch us take flight.
Welcome back to UofL Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville. Sitting in front of me is Julie Peteet. She's a professor of anthropology, and she's also the director of Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies at the University of Louisville. She just finished up a book called Space and Mobility in Palestine. And she's obviously been following the recent events in the Middle East with great interest. So we've got her on the show to talk about the events in the Middle East with great interest. So, Julie, tell me a little bit about what you do as the director of Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies at UofL. What's that?
Oh, well, that's a minor program. Students take 2 years of Arabic and then a series of courses on the Middle East. And they come out with this very nice minor with pretty good Arabic skills as well.
So they can go into the CIA and speak Arabic and that kind of thing, right?
Oh, yes. And there are quite a few of them interested in, intelligence work. We do get those, and some want to go into grad school. Some want to go into diplomacy as well. So.
All right. Well, you've been, I'm sure, watching what's going on over in the Middle East with great interest. And I think the big thing that's happening right now is all this talk about the Syrian refugees and whether to bar them from the United States and to restrict them. What's going on with that in your mind? What's going on with that?
Okay, well, there's a couple things going on here. One is there's been this conflation of refugees and immigrants with criminality and terrorism. And this is an election year. And so this becomes a hot button issue. All right. We are a country of immigrants. We have a long history of accepting refugees. And, we sometimes forget historically, we took in over 1 million Southeast Asians in the 1980s.
Right.
We've got this history. We have the capacity. We continue to take Cubans. We've taken very few Syrians. And, the Syrian crisis is the humanitarian crisis of our era. I mean, it is the largest displacement of people since World War II. Syria has a population of around 24 million. Half of those people are displaced. Around 5 to 6 million are refugees. The rest are internally displaced. So, but getting back to our issues with conflating terrorism and refugees, we have a history of admitting people, but we also have a long history of anti-immigrant sentiment. And you combine that with Islamophobia, and it's a potent mix.
Well, it's understandable, though, isn't it, at these times? I mean, it happens. It's human nature, isn't it?
It is to a certain extent, but you also have to look at the evidence. And refugees generally are fleeing terrorism. Syrian refugees are fleeing ISIS and Al-Qaeda and a whole series of militias, as well as their own state, a very repressive authoritarian state that has inflicted tremendous violence on them, in fact, much more violence than the opposition.
Right.
So, we have only accepted around 18 to 1,900 Syrian refugees since 2012.
That's not very many.
It's not very many. When you think of what Germany recently did, taking 800, 900,000 Syrian refugees. So what we have to remember is we have a long history of demonizing refugees and immigrants, from the Irish, who at one time were very discriminated against, to looking at people coming from Eastern Europe as communist threat, subversives, anarchists.
So we're repeating history, basically. We're repeating
history.
history, and maybe we should have learned from
Yes,
before. Is that what
yes.
you're trying to say,
Yeah,
I think?
the Chinese
Okay.
Exclusion Act, and then we start conflating refugees also, not just with terrorism and criminality, but pathology in general. They're going to bring diseases. This was with the Haitians. They're going to bring AIDS and TB and what have you. And so I think you've got anti-immigration sentiment and then this Islamophobia, which is taken over. And someone like Trump taps into that in a very clever way.
Well, we're talking with Julie Peteet. She is the Director of Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies at the University of Louisville. We're talking about what's going on in the Middle East. Let's broaden the topic a little bit. Is there anything stable about the Middle East right now from your view? No. Or is everything just total instability?
I think it's total instability except for a few islands of stability.
Jordan.
When you look at the map, Jordan is it, and Turkey to some extent. The region is being remapped and redesigned in many ways, going back almost to the end of World War I and the breakup of the Ottoman Empire and the formation of states. All those states are sort of imploding. Borders are up for questioning. So right now it's a very dangerous, unstable place.
You've written about the Palestinians. Do you think a lot of this instability, you've got the different factions of Islamic religion, the Sunnis and the Shias that are fighting each other, but you've also got, from its core, the Palestinians and the Israelis. Is all of this, in your mind, all the instability in the Middle East, stemming from the Palestinian and Israeli conflict?
Not everything. You can't reduce everything in the region to that. I mean,
too simplistic.
It's too simplistic. But for 4 decades, it was the key issue. It was the major grievance in the region that sort of kept alive an anti-colonial sentiment, anti-American sentiment, because of our unwavering support for Israel. And you still have to factor it in as a destabilizing force. But I think, the war on Iraq is what really has led to this destabilization and opening the void for groups like ISIS to step into the fray.
And you can't put the genie back in the bottle. So if you're all powerful and you get to walk into the president's office tomorrow and say, "I'm the president of the United States," what would you do?
Oh, goodness gracious.
You're all powerful. I'm making you the Wizard of Oz, okay?
Yeah, no, and we have to be careful not to offer solutions. If the our political candidates, our government can offer solutions, I'm not sure I can, but perhaps stepping back and, stop fueling the kind of instability through arms sales, support of dictators and authoritarian regimes, and putting in military forces might help.
Might help. Do you see a two-state solution ever happening between Israel and Palestine?
Two-state, no. I think we've gone beyond 2 states with the settlement.
Not going to happen.
It would be very difficult. It would require a complete Israeli withdrawal, and I'm not sure are they really committed to a 2-state solution? And Israel's a complex place. There are people who support 2 states and there are people who don't, but these sort of right-wing powers that be have no intention of pursuing a 2-state solution. They are just buying time to expand settlements.
Julie Peteet, thanks so much for being on. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, after the break, the director of the McConnell Center, Gary Gregg, coming up. You're listening to UofL Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville.
My name is Alan. I'm a senior public health major here at UofL. I have to say that my UofL experience has been absolutely terrific. I've received all the support in the world that I could ever ask for. I want every student that comes through these doors of the university to have a similar experience and to get involved and to feel like they are a part of something and to develop their passions and to take that, graduate from the university and contribute and give back to their community. Go Cards.
Welcome back to UofL Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville. Sitting in front of me is Gary Gregg from the McConnell Center. McConnell Center is hosting a series of speakers this spring in honor of the 25th anniversary of the McConnell Center. So congratulations, you got to 25, Mr. Director. Gary is the director of the McConnell Center, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, we're very excited about it. Most people don't realize that we are 25 years old, but we have been around for that long now. We've had more than 200 students that have been through our program. We've given them more than $3.5 million in scholarships. We've done some pretty big stuff, and we're looking forward to celebrating it. In the spring, we're going to celebrate it particularly by talking about citizenship and statesmanship in America.
Yeah, I got the flyer right here. You've got one coming up here in a couple of weeks. The Wisdom of Statesmen. Tell me about that one. What's the big deal with that?
Yeah, we're going to start off with a pretty world-renowned political philosopher, William B. Allen, from used to be the commissioner on civil rights, on the Commission on Civil Rights. He was dean of Michigan State University's James Madison program. He's going to try to start us off by bringing us into the wisdom of the ages on questions of statesmanship and political leadership. What's it look like? What advice do the ancients have for us? So we're going to start there, and then we're going to get a little bit more nitty-gritty as we go along through the year.
In February, you've got the one that had the most interest for me, Abraham Lincoln, Moments of Statesmanship.
Yeah, we're going to we have Jose Fernandez, who is the director of the Center for Statesmanship, Law, and Liberty at the Rochester Institute of Technology. He's just written a book called Abraham Lincoln, Philosopher Statesman that just came out in 2015. And it's Lincoln's birthday, so we're going to have some cake. I hope you come out for some cake and some talk about moments of statesmanship in Lincoln's life and what we can learn from him today.
And for those of you who don't know when Lincoln's birthday is, it's February 12th.
That's exactly
the program's at 6 o'clock, and RIT, by the way, is from my backyard. I grew up in Rochester, New York. So
very good.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. And then you got a couple in March and April, if you want to talk briefly about those. And
yeah, we have Kent Masterson Brown on March 7th, talk about the Kentucky resolutions and what we can learn from them. And then we're going to wrap up with Jay Winnick, New York Times bestselling author of his brand new book. It's getting a lot of traction, 1944, which explores that key year in World War II and FDR, and asks the question, with history sort of given a pass to FDR on the Holocaust, and he raises some pretty big questions of whether FDR might have been able to do a little bit more to prevent some of that great tragedy.
Okay, and then so coming up, the one right in front of you, for those of you who are listening or watching, The Wisdom of Statesmen is on January 19th at 6 o'clock. Is that in the Chow Auditorium?
It is, indeed.
Okay,
all of them in the Chow Auditorium, Ekstrom Library.
So put that on your list of things to do. And I got to ask you, the title of these programs is Citizens and Statesmen. Did you pick that because, not to be pessimistic here or anything, but that there aren't a lot of citizens and statesmen around these days, Gary?
I think in 2016, this is vitally needed to talk about our role as citizens, to talk about the role of leadership, political leadership, and statesmanship. How do we recognize it? How do we see it? How do we recognize it in our candidates, perhaps? How do we encourage candidates to be statesmen, perhaps? So I think it's very vital. We're going to do not only this public lecture series, it's going to run the entire year for us, but with our college students, we've got them back into the founding documents, reading the Federalist Papers, talking about how the institutions are working right now. In the summer, in June, we'll do a program for high school students, our Young Leaders Academy. And it's going to focus on the origins of our political parties and how they've developed over time. So we're going to have a full year focusing on this for 2016, and hope make a little bit of good and add to the dialogue in America.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot. Is it working right now? Do we have statesmen and citizenship?
I think
Washington specifically.
Well, I won't answer that specifically, but I will say that one of the reasons to have this is that our trust in government is at an all-time low. Our trust in institutions is at an all-time low. Our last couple of presidents have hit some really rock-bottom popularity. Congress is at single digits or so now. So certainly the American people don't think so.
All right, Gary Gregg from the McConnell Center. He's the director of the McConnell Center with that series coming up. Congratulations on the 25th.
Appreciate it very much.
All right, stick around, because before we wrap it up, I always like to share a segment we call Did You Know? A piece of trivia or factoid about the University of Louisville, and you love history. So since we were talking a little history, did you know that UofL's former graduate school, now called the School of Interdisciplinary and Graduate Studies, was established in 1915, though advanced degrees were awarded as early as 1908. Other advanced courses were offered by the schools of medicine and law as early as 1856. And yes, that is before the Civil War.
Indeed it is.
There you go. All right. You can find the podcast of all these programs on soundcloud.com/UofL. Thanks to Metro TV for airing the video versions of these programs. We appreciate you listening. You've been listening to U of L Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville, and go Cards.